Well, hi everyone, and welcome to Ask and Wonder, the show that brings Christians and skeptics together to talk about the big questions in life. And last week we had a grill a Christian. I was grilled to the core by my friends Joel Diemoz and Elliott Martin. And as promised, today we have a grill an atheist. I'm going to be asking them questions now. And as you know, the rule is that they cannot ask me questions. They can only answer my questions. So before we start with this, I just want to ask them, are you guys doing okay? Are you guys excited about this? Are you guys afraid? Or what's happening in your hearts at this moment?
Pedro, I wish that I could tell you that I was afraid. I mean, what's the worst that could happen is my worldview gets completely destroyed. I don't think that's anything necessarily to be afraid of. If anything, it'd be an interesting thing. I do have a question though.
Yeah.
Are we allowed to ask clarifying questions? So
Of course.
if I don't understand a question,
yeah.
we can clarify it, but only in the pursuit of actually answering it.
Definitely. That is for sure. I would also invite you, you don't have to do this. When you guys were asking me questions, what I tried to do is to answer solely from my Christian worldview. And in my answers, I didn't compare, if I remember well, any of my answers to the an atheist worldview to undermine the atheist worldview in my answers. So I would challenge you to only stay in your atheist worldview, although you don't have to do that at all, but it would be fun to just hear from the atheist worldview just so we can learn more about this. Okay. Yeah, Elliot, any words?
Yeah, the only thing I was going to do was also break the rules right away like Joel did and just ask if I have a question for Joel or if Joel has a question for me, could we potentially throw it back and forth?
Well, I mean, yes, I'm not going to say no to that, but if it stays in topic and and the questions, so the points of this show is to actually challenge the worldview. So if I see that the questions are just starting to talk about topics instead of the challenging aspects of it, challenging and also the learning aspects of it, then I would invite you perhaps to move on. But that is okay, of course. Okay.
Sweet.
Well, for the viewers and those of you that are listening, thank you very much. As always, we are very excited to do these things. And let's just jump right in, okay? Perfect. So my first question is for you guys, and you guys can decide who answers it. My first question for you is, why is there something rather than nothing?
Joel, do you want to start or?
I mean, I hate to punt like this on the very first question, but I don't know. That might be a question like we talked about last week, that perhaps humans may never know, but it's certainly not anything that I could claim to make any kind of justified claim about.
Okay.
I don't really think that I guess it's not a question that necessarily bothers me. Even the idea of like absolute nothingness, nothing at all existing to me is almost weirder than something existing, but it not having like a necessary creator.
Okay.
Elliot, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, just a little bit. But I definitely am going to echo, what Joel said. I don't know, and I'm just happy to leave that question, unanswered for the time being until I feel like we have much more grounding for, making a claim either way. I do also think that this question often leads me to respond by saying it's a bad question. It just isn't a question that we should necessarily be asking about the something and the nothing. Kind of what Joel was saying right there, what is nothing in a pure sense like that, in that most idealistic sense, it may not even be possible. But also, if it's just a bad question, why is there something instead of nothing? Then we just won't ever get any answers. There are a lot of models. I believe Sean Carroll has talked on this. There are a lot of models that show an infinite universe, at least in some sense. some sense of an eternal physical material something. Again, yeah, we're not there yet, and I'm just happy to throw up my hands and not
Okay.
positive.
So it's the I don't know, and perhaps it's even a bad question. Would you? Okay. Do you
Yeah.
think that because we ask why questions all the time in order to figure out the way we think, the way we see the world, for the empirical, like inductive method, or to know empirically the things that are around us. Is it possible that saying that why is there something rather than nothing, considering that question is a bad question, is a way of escapism?
I can totally understand that. And I would like to at least point out the fact that oftentimes when we ask why is something, or why did this happen, it's a couple of different whys that we're going for. It's not just one overarching, here's the total answer, circle it, we'll move on. Sometimes we're saying why in the sense of like, what were the factors that led up to this? Sometimes we're saying why in the sense of what was the actual mechanism that made this occur. So sometimes it isn't always cut and dry when we say that. And so I think the first thing that we would have to do is really suss out why we are going for there. And then ultimately we may find that at the end of the day, once we break it down and we really understand what we're trying to explain, again, A, we just may not know, we may never know, B, and then C, it may not even matter. It may not matter why there is something instead of nothing, because at least in a pragmatic sense, there does appear to be. And so we have to do something.
And let me see if I can offer an example that might flesh out what Elliott's saying a little bit, because I think him and I are of similar minds here. You could look at, say, a fire burning, and you could ask, why is the fire burning? And somebody could answer, the fire is burning because of the rapid oxidation of carbon atoms, right? It's generating heat. Or somebody could respond and they could say, like, give sort of like a metaphysical or like a transcendental sort of answer, or more, I guess, maybe a more mystical answer, trying to like answer the question of like why anything happens. And so I think that those are two distinct concepts, the why in the sense of a mechanism, an explanatory mechanism, or the why in the sense of what I think would be really a narrative that humans are creating around something that doesn't necessarily warrant a narrative.
Okay, there's something that Elliott mentioned that said that this question actually, to the point, might get us to the point of realizing that the answer wouldn't matter. And as a Christian, if I were to give that answer to you, you wouldn't accept it. Now, why would I accept an answer? Why should I accept an answer about the existence of the universe that focuses on mere opinion, like even coming from scientists, like saying, like that question, why is there something rather than nothing, might actually not matter at all?
I'm a little confused in where you think either Joel or I might not accept you saying how we got here doesn't matter, because if we're just looking at this in the perspective of Christianity versus atheism, the guerrilla Christian, guerrilla atheist, in an atheist understanding and an atheistic answer, we're not saying jack about where the universe comes from. All we're simply saying is we are unconvinced by your claim of where the universe comes from.
Yeah, but so, I heard you, Elliott, I heard you, perhaps I misheard you there, but I heard you say that perhaps the answer might not matter. That correct. You said that. So that's what I'm saying. That is an opinion, that is mere opinion that is not based in scientific facts or philosophical reasoning. And when having conversations about, for example, opinions about why God work, how could God work in the world like this or that, those answers are usually considered as weak. And
I think it's a bit of a misunderstanding. It's a
Okay.
bit of a misunderstanding of two things. So
Okay.
when I'm saying that may not matter, one of the things that I'm saying is, for all, again, in a pragmatic sense, one of the things that, like, I've heard people argue that in a truly humanist world where we can actually lay everything out perfectly, we would never put anybody in jail. And so putting people in jail is always technically immoral, but we have to do it pragmatically because we don't have some of the technology or advancements in society. And so if the question, which it is, why is there something rather than nothing, if that's really trying to help us understand what we do in our day-to-day lives, the ultimate cause of that may have absolutely nothing valuable to say about. It may have just been, I don't know, an atom exploded. That may be the cause, is that just an atom exploded and everything came to be. And that doesn't necessarily matter for what we do. But when it comes to a religious, a theological understanding, there is a claim that is made that specifically says this is where the universe comes from. This is why the universe is. So if we're just looking at this from an atheist worldview, so to say, I would just simply say the atheist generally is not making a claim. We're not saying we know one way or the other. We're just simply saying it's here.
Okay, I don't think, I think I understood it. Then I don't think it was a misunderstanding.
Okay,
but thank you for clarifying that. Okay, so I could have more questions about that one, but
I want to hear what Joel has to say.
Yes,
Well,
Joel.
sure. And I guess I would just ask a clarifying question. When you say, why is there something, do you mean what brought that something into being, as in what was the first cause?
Right.
Or do you mean, why is there something? There's a possibility that there could be nothing. There seems to necessarily, or you're wanting an explanation why there is not nothing. So in the former, it's what is the first cause? In the latter, I'm asking. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So definitely both, it might be even more multi-layered than that, but I think I got the answer from what you said. It's either I don't know, or perhaps we will know in the future, but we just don't know yet. So I think you guys answered it. So
yeah, and that's I think we're pretty eye to eye on that.
So short question about that. Do you guys have expectations that one day we'll know the answer for any of these multi-layer question?
I hate to punt again early, but I don't know 100%. I'm honestly not positive what the limitations of our understanding will be, and I just don't. I don't think we should arbitrarily cut it off. Just because we haven't shown various things yet doesn't mean that we should say there are people much smarter than me, much more studied than me, that feel very confident when they say through science we will never understand consciousness. And I just think that's ground that I am not willing to stand on. It's the horse that's won every race thus far. If I have to put money on it, I'd probably put it on that horse.
So I'm more hopeful about science's, or I should say humans' ability to at least make meaningful postulates about the very early conditions of the universe, but also going like beyond the universe. So like what happened before the Big Bang. I don't see why we couldn't at least one day make a justified construction of what that true beginning looked like, if that true beginning even exists, because maybe it doesn't. I don't know. But I do think that saying I don't know and recognizing what you don't know is one of the healthiest epistemically things that you can do. I don't think anybody should ever be afraid to say that we don't have information about this. Because I actually think you get yourself in a lot of trouble when you lean over your handlebars about what you think you know,
Yeah.
when you actually don't.
By the way, when you guys answered, I don't know. I think that is a very humble answer. Like I think it's actually a good answer from your worldview, you know. And let me ask you a question about this. So actually, just I like this topic a lot. So we have had many experiences in the past in which we as humans have described and explained many things, but when we actually end up explaining something 100%, we realize that that explanation and description doesn't explain the things itself. So do we have an explanation that when we describe the universe, if we do it 100%, that explanation is going to explain the explanation that comes before, which is why it exists after all?
Can you clarify what you mean by thing in itself?
Yeah.
And
So for example, let me put an example about this. Let's talk about the law of gravity. Something easier. So let's imagine a car, right? We see a car and we have the knowledge and we have the experience. We can describe everything that it does, everything. We describe the whole thing, but then the existence of a car, it seems to imply a different type of explanation. The nature of that explanation is different than from the one that it actually describes what it is. So my question is, do we have an expectation on science that science perhaps one day will explain the reason why the universe can be explained? Is that possible for science? As we know it now, the answer would be no. But my question is, are you guys open for science to go beyond itself and being able to explain that one day?
So if I am understanding you right, what you're saying is a car is different than the sum of all car parts and all car engineering and all of the physical interactions of a car.
Correct.
And you're comparing that to the universe. So, okay. And about our ability to make explanatory claims about the universe.
Yeah, because when you explain the car, the whole thing, all the parts and all the interaction, everything is explained. But then there are many things that actually the car itself is not being explained as a whole. It doesn't have an explanation. So we still don't know why the car is there and why the car is functioning that way and why the car has actually a function. We see that in the universe when we explore it. So it's not just a thing that we describe, but we describe it, but the universe is actually doing something as far as we know through very specific laws. So again, the questions is, do you guys have expectations that perhaps one day science will explain the universe as a whole, not just by the description of it?
So I'm sorry, Elliot, I'll let you go ahead.
Because mine's really quick, and I hope this might shed a little bit more light on this. This is a misunderstanding of the map and the territory.
Okay.
So if we look at a map of Spain, okay, and we just open up an atlas and we just see the whole country, right? There's Portugal, there's France, some water, and then we actually make the map better, and we go, oh look, let's put all the cities on there. And then we go, oh look, let's put all the mountains. We say, oh look, let's name all the neighborhoods. And then we get to the point that the map is so incredibly, and obviously at this point it isn't something practical, but let's just expand our thinking with this. We get to the point that the map describes in absolute perfect detail everything. And what I mean by that is, Jose lives here and Pedro's family lives here, and we get to the perfect description. The map will still never be Spain.
Correct.
And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. The map is not supposed to be map.
Yeah,
the map is not supposed to be Spain. It's supposed to be a description of Spain. Whatever Spain is, the map is supposed to correspond to reality. So, and the fact that there are two separate things is is okay. It doesn't shake anything fundamentally.
Yeah, it doesn't. And that's what my question is. For example, in this explanation, Elliot, which by the way was very cool. So in this explanation, in order to make a map of Spain, you have to have Spain first. So
Correct.
you bring this analogy to the universe. And
Yes.
definitely those two explanations are okay. But with the first one, if we make, let's bring this analogy to the universe. If we actually make a perfect map of the universe, we know that the map is not the universe.
Right.
So when we bring the question about the universe itself, what happens with that? What is the expectations about that?
What's the question? Is the question just still what is the universe? Because
Yeah,
then the answer.
why is there an universe after all? Why Spain analogically?
I think we're changing there. I think we're going back to the first, why something instead of nothing. But in this question, which is, well, what is Spain? So once we get that perfect map, the question, what is Spain, is answered by the map. The map is the best explanation of what Spain is. But then obviously Spain has to exist outside of the map, because that's what our science is. That's what our logic and math is. It's a description of the world. It's not the world itself. Our science is not the fundamental metaphysics that holds up the world. Are that's just simply how we interact with it, right?
Okay.
So it's not the fact that we have a map that says this is what Spain is that makes Spain be. Spain is there, and then to understand it, we create a map of it so we can get around.
So I might expand Elliott's thoughts to all of language. So like not just science, but language in general, or our abstractions in general is how we parse up reality, how we carve up reality at the joints, if you will, to be able to understand it conceptually. So for example, Spain is a political territory in the Iberian Peninsula bordered by Portugal and by France. All of those abstractions is just the culmination of work and ideas and understanding that we've inherited. So that way we have an idea of what a political entity is, because people parse that out and defined it for us in the past. I don't think that Spain as such requires an explanation beyond that which we give it with our abstractions, with our language.
Yes.
Well, let's not stay with this with the analogy. Let's bring the analogy to the actual universe. Let me actually help with this. In order for this conversation and these analogies that we're putting together to work, we need a universe with laws of physics that allow life, and a brain that allows language and oxygen so that we can breathe. And all of these things are being taken for granted while being actually built in this analogy. So I would say that, yeah, the answer for my question, so the why of everything, so that all these elements that make the why something, with the answer from your perspective at this moment is we don't know. I don't want to. I don't want to. Wait. Give me a second, because I don't want to put words into your mouth. I just want to make sure that I understand. So your answer is we don't know now, and perhaps we will never know. And if we can, perhaps science would get to a point in which it would supersede itself and it would create a method to answer this question. Is that what you're trying to say?
Go ahead, Joel.
So there was actually a point that I wanted to get to earlier about what science is capable of. And actually, I didn't get to address it. You brought it up. I don't think science is capable of creating meta theories about knowledge itself.
Okay.
I don't think that's the purpose of science. I think other forms of reasoning, epistemology, which is outside of science, science is a subset, it's a applied epistemology. I think that there are other routes that people have taken to justify science, or would be able to perhaps justify whatever first cause that may exist hypothetically in the future. But I don't think that's science. Now, this why question, I do think we can answer it in a sense, in one of the senses of the words, that we described earlier, in the same way that fire is an oxidation of carbon atoms, I think we can make an explanation for like why oxygen is required, like the things that you said that we were taking for granted. Well, oxygen is required because our bodies have adapted to respirate based upon a chemical reaction that requires oxygen. It's not that oxygen was gifted to us. It's that we as humans, as Homo sapiens, have evolved to utilize oxygen. And actually, oxygen wouldn't be useful for a single-celled organism that lived next to a vent in the ocean, right? That wouldn't be a good thing for them.
Okay, well, I think
real quick,
yes,
if I could,
very quick, yeah,
because I think Joel did hit on a good point there, which is that there are these other fields out there that ultimately can answer some of these questions that these specific aspects of what science looks at doesn't answer for us. But ultimately, we will find that there are certain things. So there were philosophical ways that we went about doing things for a long time. And when we were able to discover the fact that, hey, some of these premises actually don't correspond to reality. And that is important. And so we will ultimately have to adjust. And we may ultimately find out by continuing to use the scientific method in a bunch of ways, we may find out that there are aspects of it that are flawed. But so far, the thing that has been able to answer everything in the past and give us predictions about the future that have been right have been this method. And that method is something that we should keep using until we find some major flaws in it.
Although even with the methods that you're talking about and this potential new method, the existence of that method is just taken for granted. That's why the questions would go.
It's the only one that's consistent. It's
Okay.
the only one that answer that. So,
but consistency is also a quality. The consistency is also a quality that we take for granted in the conversation. That's why I think
consistency would exist, I think, and Joel can probably help me on this, but wouldn't consistency be a thing for both nothing and something? Just in their basic categories, there would have to be something that is the same about everything that fits in the category of nothing and everything that fits in the category of something. There would have to be consistency amongst them. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in that category. So if we're in the category of something now, which we agree, I don't think any of us are completely solipsistic, but if we're in something right now, there is at least one thing that is consistent enough about all this something that makes it not nothing.
Yeah, and
that makes sense.
Definitely, yes, it does. But now you brought the quality of consistency to nothingness, and nothingness would kind of, there would be an absence of anything. But let's move on to another question. You guys did amazing with this one. I liked your answers. Although I don't agree with them, but I like them a lot. Let's go to our second question. What's the purpose of your life?
I often take a similar stance as a lot of other speakers, atheists, skeptics, speakers out there, where it's more along the lines of the purpose of an individual human's life is that individual human's own purpose. So your purpose is going to be different from mine, everybody else's purpose. I'm willing to at least discuss the potential that there is some thread that connects all living things or all existence that may have some purpose. Maybe there's something fundamental about what it means to exist that means that at the very least we should exist, right? But again, part of me in a pragmatic sense, it's not 100% necessary to know what the purpose of rocks are for. If I, as a conscious, agent and the world around me can give purposes for rocks individually. I collect rocks, I cut rocks, I love rocks, I like to talk about them. Other people put them in a garden, other people use them as a hammer. Their purpose for the rock and my purpose for the rock don't necessarily have to be the same. And that's okay, just like it is for us individually, and potentially even more so as conscious agents.
Okay, so yeah, you have what's your answer? I think perhaps I'm missing it, but I didn't hear Elliot. I didn't hear
Me?
the answer. Yeah, what's the
My
purpose of your life, Elliot Martin?
just whatever I choose, whatever I particularly choose. I think my purpose is just to keep riding out the roller coaster as long as possible for the period of time. Maybe one day I'll wake up and I'll stumble on something, but right now I just really enjoy waking up every day. So we're going to keep that going.
Okay. And what about you, Joel? What's the purpose of your life? Joel Diemoz.
You say, what should the purpose of my life be, or
No,
what is the purpose of? Okay.
What is the
All right.
purpose of your life?
Sure. So I'll start with a meta answer, a little bit like Elliott gave, and then I'll get into my personal answer. I think that we accept aesthetics to be subjective, right? We accept different tastes in music. We accept different tastes in movies. I think that it would follow that there would be different people would find different purposes for their life. And I know I said I wasn't allowed to like talk about the theistic worldview, but I will briefly, if only to, I think, sort of develop what I'm talking about here. I think that one of the good things that religion does in terms of its ritual, in terms of its structure, in terms of its culture, is to accentuate and to encourage the types of things that will often give people meaning. So, for example, a focus on somebody other than yourself, a focus on serving those less fortunate, will oftentimes give people meaning. For lots of people, that will give them meaning. Not for everybody, but for lots of people. And lots of Christian traditions that put that emphasis on humble service helps to give people meaning. In a different society, for example, if you were like a Norse Viking and your meaning, I'm sorry, a Norse Viking?
No, it just reminded me of 300. Sorry, that's a bad one.
Right. Your meaning would be different, and your religious institutions and your religious traditions would reflect that. So I would say that I accept that there will be different meaning for everyone. I hope that what people do will be healthy for them, because I think that sometimes people will go about getting meaning or trying to get meaning in unhealthy ways. For example, you could look at like somebody lost at the bottom of the barrel, the bottom of the wine glass, is looking for meaning in a substance, which is probably unhealthy and probably not going to be compatible with that person thriving. Right. So I to bring it back to my personal answer, and this is actually something I thought about ahead of time, because I suspected that you might ask me this. What gives me meaning first and foremost, and I think what gives me the most amount of meaning, is my relationship with my family, my relationship with my wife. I think that my work gives me meaning. So when I write, I enjoy that. I enjoy the idea, or I think it gives me meaning in life, the idea that I might be contributing something greater than myself, that I might be leaving a legacy behind for humanity that might make it better for other people. Soccer gives me meaning, right? I wake up and I pound the pavement when I can. More, I should be doing it more, but I wake up and I work out and I train in soccer because the thrill of the competition gives me meaning. Not just that, the joy of the game itself gives me meaning. That's why I go out and coach and do volunteer work with soccer organizations.
Okay, and so Noel, let me ask another question.
Okay.
So that is okay. And then what happens when you add the variable of death to your personal answers, everything that you guys like doing and enjoying and all of this? What happens when you think about the end of it? Does it change a little bit the way you approach life? And if so, how does it change it?
Well, I don't think things can exist without an end. I don't think, like, immortality to me would be almost worse than death, right? Like I couldn't even imagine my consciousness existing for all times. Like at some point, it's like, I don't know.
But
Whoa,
Joe,
that's too much.
when you have a family member that passes away, for example, or a friend, then why do you cry?
Well, I cry. Well, it depends a lot on the context, right? So I might cry because their life was cut short and their possible futures were robbed of them, and I cared about this person. I might cry because I no longer have this person in my life.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily always think that death is sad.
Okay.
I think that we can still find joy in death, or joy in the celebration of a life well lived.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I would cry. I think I cry for a couple of different reasons, and perhaps those three are what come to my mind first.
Okay. Thank you, Joel. And what about you, Elliot? What do you think about this?
Yeah. I mean, for the super personal aspect of it, when I am dead, I am comfortable with the fact that it doesn't matter. I'm done. My game is over. It's done. I can't restart. I don't get to see the sadness of everybody else. And
How do you know that?
well, right. There's all that crap. But hang on. I'm under the acceptance that there is no soul. There's nowhere to go after this. And so on a purely personal aspect, when I'm gone, it just stops. The tape just ends. It's fade to black. Okay. And if that's the case, which, yeah, I mean, we could talk forever about how do we know and do we really all that. But if that's the case, then it doesn't change anything about the movie while it's playing. The movie while it's playing is still the movie. And it for me, it kind of makes it a little bit better. It's a short period of time that I have to say whatever I may say, meet whoever I may meet, go wherever I may go. And then when it's all said and done, it's all said and done. Okay. I think also in a philosophical sense, a little bit broader, where we're saying like, well, the fact that as we're experiencing the movie, all of these other movies are ending all around us that influence our movie, right? I think that, again, just makes it a little bit more precious. Okay. I think it just makes it a little bit more interesting and beautiful and seize the day, right? Grab the bull by the horns while you can, because eventually either you or the bull are going to die, and probably both before too long.
Okay, well, thank you for that. I wish we had more time to delve into this topic. That's so interesting. Okay, so we talked a little bit about the redefinition of sexuality in the Grill Christian, and Christianity stands in the opinion of there is only two sexes, and gender is how do you say this?
Indistinguishable from sex.
Well, yes, correct. So now, since we're not saying that there's an infinite spectrum of gender in it, we're not the ones that need to that have the burden of proof to actually prove this, right? So the people that accept this need to bring the evidence. As for example, when we have conversations about God, I say God exists, and of course the fair question that would come from you is, okay, Pedro, would you please tell us more? What's the evidence? So my question for you is, what is the evidence for the existence of an infinite spectrum of gender that can be infinitely malleable? And forgive me if you guys actually didn't say this in the last conversation. So I hope you guys actually defended this position.
I'm not positive we either of us posited one way or the other, but yeah. I would definitely stand on the claim that gender for sure is a spectrum. Okay. But I'd also happily stand on the claim that sex is a spectrum. And specifically, we can start with gender. Okay. As far as I understand, and unless we want to take a different understanding of what the definition of gender is just essentially the social constructs that are put on people. And if that's the case, then obviously it's fluid, because every culture has different views about what men and women should do. So if that's where we're going to accept what the definition of gender is, like in certain countries, men wear dresses. In other countries, men don't wear dresses. In certain countries, men farm. In other countries, women farm. So if that's what gender is, just the societal lens, which I fully accept that is the case, then yeah, of course, gender is a spectrum. Of course, gender.
So let me follow up with that, Elliot. Thank you
Sure.
very much for that. Let me follow up with that. In certain cultures, they stone people to death. In certain cultures, they don't.
Okay.
So is it fair that I'm making an analogy to what you said, so that
No.
to the point of saying, okay, so
No.
so please.
Because what you're saying right there is right or wrong. You're discussing morality. I don't accept cultural relativism.
Okay.
And gender doesn't have anything to do with being moral. Gender.
Okay. Why? Tell me why.
It's just a description of what society. So there's, oh gosh, I know I'm gonna mess this up. What is it? It's normative ethics and descriptive. Is that right? And descriptive is essentially more along the lines of anthropological, where it's just basically saying this is what this society does. Gender is just what happens with people. It's not something that's fundamental about life. It's not something that's fundamental about, that's really more in the discussion of sex. That's really more on the biological aspect, as opposed to the cultural and how we play it out between ourselves in societal. So when we talk about biological, I think there's a little bit better of a ground, but at the end of the day, we have a lot of really good evidence to show that biological sex is also more fluid than we would like to admit.
So even biological evidence would suggest.
I know I'm not supposed to ask questions, but where do you put XXY chromosomes? Where do you put those humans on that? Because if they're not XX and they're not XY, they got to be in the center, and that sounds like a spectrum to me.
Okay. What do you think? What do you think about this, Joel?
So I wanted to start with a pretty massive caveat. There are people that know a lot more about gender theory than I do. This is not something that I know a lot about, but I will do my best to wade through what is a really sensitive topic, I guess, with the most amount of grace I can muster. So
it is sensitive, but we shouldn't be afraid of asking questions about it.
Sure. Now, you mentioned that the person claiming that gender is a binary doesn't have the burden of proof. I would disagree with that notion. I think we both have the burden of proof. I think if you're going to claim that sex and gender are one and the same, and that we have biological evidence to suggest that if a person has this chromosome orientation, that they should use these pronouns. I think if you're making that claim, that you yourselves have the burden of proof. I think that gender as a binary, it is a given in our society, but I don't think that's necessarily the default position. Now, I know this is not Guerrilla Christian Day, so I'm not going to push Pedro on that, but I am going to try to give an account of why I think gender is a spectrum, and it's not going to be too different than Elliott's account here. I think that really we're making a description of the way that societies use the word gender. What were the roles? What were the words associated with the groups of people, right? And what I think that's really what people are talking about, right? Is the roles and the references that they should be free to choose for themselves as a transgendered person, right? Now, you could make the argument that the best society is one where gender is a binary, and that we should suppress people's desire to use whatever pronouns or to act in whatever way they choose. You could make a moral argument there. I don't necessarily buy it. I think that people should, as my moral grounding, be free to choose their own ends insofar as they don't harm anyone else. And as I understand it, most transgendered people aren't harming anyone.
Yeah, so that is a good distinction, because the issue here, or the question that we're trying to answer, the burden of proof that I'm asking, or the evidence, is not that people have the freedom of choice. It's actually, is it true or not? So
Sure.
now let me ask you a question about this. You said that if we say that there are only two sexes, and the sexes are in the word inextricably connected to the gender. That's what I'm trying to say. I hope I'm expressing that well.
Fundamentally tied together.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
what if I say what the new atheism, or atheism, has kind of redefined itself, and saying that, well, we just lack a knowledge about God. What if we actually approach this, and I would say, I just lack a knowledge about this infinite spectrum, so the burden of proof is not on me now. So what is
I
the
think that would be
evidence?
disingenuous.
How?
I think if you truly held that position, all I could do is show you all of the people that I know that are transgender.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the evidence is that the fact
Yeah.
that we could look back in society and see this
Yeah.
widely different way that gender has manifested.
Yeah.
Depending on the time and the location and the
when
social.
you guys mentioned that, you mentioned culture, and this widely, like it has been shown widely that it has been so different from each other. I'm not an expert on this, so that's why I like this. I'm asking questions because I want to learn. So I don't want to put you on the spot.
Well,
no, let me finish
okay,
this,
okay.
Elliot. So what is no, it's okay, man. So what is this incredible difference? Like, men end up doing things that are not manly culturally for us, the way, what we're talking about? Because I don't see how in different societies throughout history, men and women have been doing things that are so different from each other. Do you guys have any example?
I have a good example that's kind of quick, and it's not. I don't think this will cause any tensions with anybody.
Yeah.
So Joel and I know each other well enough. We've interacted. We've never actually met in person just yet. But Joel, let me ask you a quick question. If you and I got together tomorrow in a coffee shop and we started holding hands while we were standing at the register, would that be something that you would say, you and I and most other people would generally say, that two straight cis men that are not romantic with each other or anything, that's probably not something that men would do? Yeah? They do in Islamic cultures all the time. They do it in Islamic cultures all the time. Done. That right there shows that gender, at least on one level, is fluid enough. And I think we can show on many, many, many other levels that it goes back and forth on enough things like that, that we can say that gender in and of itself is definitely fluid. And then we can talk about biology, and that's where we can dig into.
This is good. I get the example. Men kiss each other.
Yeah. But Joel and I would never do that. We would never meet each other.
Okay, so but what we're talking here, I'm going to say the same thing that I said while talking about. First of all, I just want to know the truth about things. And definitely we're talking about people with the same rights, with the same freedom to choose. That is for sure. But I'm not the one making the claim. I'm not the one. So that's why I'm asking the questions. So can we truly equate two men holding hands, or me kissing a friend that is a male in Spain, to actually me thinking that I am a woman? Can we equate the both at the same level?
They're two separate topics that we have to break apart. They're two separate things that we have to break apart.
Okay.
Because really what we have been talking about currently is just simply the societal understandings and interactions and cultural behavior amongst certain people that fit, again, a societal understanding of what is man, woman, X, XX, XY. But that is a separate topic and a separate discussion and a separate understanding from when it comes to the actual biology of the fact.
Okay.
Anybody that is out there that is claiming that there is no difference whatsoever biologically between XX and XY clearly does not know anything. But claiming that there is differences between XX and XY biologically is not in any way, shape, or form denying trans people, A, their existence, A, their humanity, their rights, none of that whatsoever. And I fully am on the side that we should continue to find and do more scientific studies. There's actually, I could probably list a handful of different really great content creators on a bunch of different platforms. One of them particularly, I'll mention, Katie Montgomery is a fantastic trans rights activist that will just go through the data point by point. She will just pull up the freaking scientific paper and just read you what the findings are. And when the findings say certain things, you can't deny that. When ultimately at the end of the day, what we find is, okay, sure, there is a difference between XX and XY, but that in and of itself is not apparently what biologists use to classify as male or female. That apparently isn't it. And if that's the case, well, then we have to understand what all of the factors are. And if we understand what all of the factors are, then it's much easier to say, oh yeah, well, totally. If there are 10 boxes to be checked, let's just say theoretically, in what it means to biologically be a man and biologically be a woman. If there are 10 different boxes and there are 7 boxes checked in man and 3 boxes checked in woman, doesn't matter what the person looks like. The person seems to check more boxes in male. But then again, that right there, though, is already kind of assuming, I'll admit that's a little circular, there's already kind of an assumption in there that you could have that fluidity. But I think we find that. I think we find that all the time. We find real burly men that do all kinds of things that other people would think are real feminine. And we find, real girly women that do a lot of things that are masculine.
Yeah, so for once, kind of, we're saying that that science is being transcended by culture. That's what we're saying, right?
I disagree. No, because again, back to what I said. If what we're thinking is right now, because again, let's step off of gender and just go to the biology, just go to the science, not how society does with it. But if the biology is what we're saying is the two sides are XX here and XY here, well, where do you put XXY? Where do you put a bunch of people throughout history that are XXY?
But what is the percentage of that people that's
who cares?
Wait. No, well, I mean, when do we say who cares when we talk about statistics and science?
If it's 1% that shows XXY, then XXY exists. And that's all we need to prove to show a spectrum.
Oh, okay.
All we need to prove is show that there is a variation between the two that may be somewhere in the middle, and that would ultimately show that we do have a spectrum.
To the point that biologically we can end up redefining biology because of only one case. This is when, I don't know if in science we actually we come and skip the probability, the statistics of it. I really want to know. Yeah.
One singular instance that is verified and repeatable can destroy any scientific theory. If one singular instance was discovered and verified tomorrow that showed that the germ theory of disease wasn't real, it'd be gone, baby. Okay. Because that's how science works. And that's why we can say things like germ theory of disease is a fact, gravity is a fact, evolution is a fact, is because there has never been a singular instance that disproved the theory.
The problem with that example is that you cannot prove scientifically that your gender identity is what you claim to be, right?
That's separate. Again, remember, the gender is separate from the biology, the biological aspects. So kind of one of the things we're talking about here is genotype versus phenotype.
Yeah,
The
but it's
phenotype is
separate.
the expression.
I get that. It's separate from the way you see it. I just don't see it as separate. So,
But hang on. But what if we had the ability? So again, total hypothetical,
yeah.
not the case now. But what if we had the ability to put a helmet on people that could show certain aspects of their cognitive state?
Yeah.
And those cognitive states were repeated and demonstrated a million times over. And we showed more often than not, out of 100 possibilities, men are going to accept 90. There are going to be 90 of these criteria in the category that we find with men. And then there's going to be 90 of these that we find with women. Well, if we just started putting that helmet on people who said, hey, I'm trans, I'm not actually a woman, I'm a man. If we started putting that helmet on people, then yeah, that would definitely show that.
Okay.
But again, we're not there for sure, but I don't understand why we would even without us being there, we have shown that there are thousands, millions of people that have said exactly opposite of what you've said for generations. And so at the very least, I think that's enough to just simply say, cool, they're human just the same, they have rights just the same, there's no denying their existence or anything. And
it's funny because I don't want to build false analogies here, and perhaps I'm open to keep learning, but then think about that case that you're talking about, and think about the billions of people that have thought that there's something beyond life itself, and then we approach the conversations thinking that religion is actually irrational. So in terms of statistics and numbers, I don't see how one is different from the other, and then we can call that one is irrational and one not. But let's
hang on. I can answer that. I have verifiable evidence for trans people. I have verifiable, scientific, repeatable evidence that answers all of the past data and make predictions about the future. I have it. I've seen it.
Okay. Perfect.
So
I'm sorry. I know. I'm sorry.
It's all right. I'll try to be quick. I do want to get in on this question a little bit. So I think that it's important to remember what science can do and can't do for us. Science describes what is, but science will never tell us what ought to be. So science may tell us that a certain number of people with this chromosome orientation prefer these pronouns, or prefer this gender role, or prefer to do this sort of work, or to prefer this sort of clothes. But it will never tell us that that is the proper way to go about life. It won't tell us that that is the way that people ought to be doing stuff. It only just makes descriptions. I think that when we talk about transgendered people, it is a sincere request to be treated, to be valued, to do a certain role in society. And I think that that role might be different, but I think it's valid.
Yeah, the treated and the respects and all of this, the three of us agree. Like, and also even the freedom of choosing.
Yeah.
Like seriously, like you can, okay, perfect. But I want to know if it's actually true. And that's where I want to focus,
I don't think there's anything wrong with having these discussions, especially if exactly what literally all three of us have said now multiple times, which is we are all coming from a place, at least we're trying to, right? I may have said things that have been disrespectful to people in the trans community, in the queer community, in the intersex community. I may have said something that really made a lot of asexuals angry, and that truly wasn't my intention. And I don't think either of you are coming from that at all. I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to understand the nuances. We're trying to understand what is true, and nobody's trying to deny anybody any rights or any humanity. But also, and I think it's worth pointing this out, because there have been so many instances of people throughout history that have used the casual, oh, I don't know if homosexuals can do X, to ultimately incite violence against those people, I think it's always worth to come into these, with kind of a soft touch and make known repeatedly, hey, I'm not saying gay people can't marry in this country. I
Yeah,
always think it's worthwhile to say
yeah.
that,
And I see,
specifically.
yeah, I see one point that I always try to make in my conversations with people about this topic. People have been hurt, man.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
people have been hurt, and for so much time, like they have been hurt, and this is not easy because people have been suffering a lot about this topic. Now, I'll just share, which is something that it is pretty bad. So of course the conversation needs to be there, and the challenge is accepted, meaning, hey, there's things in society that are not working. Actually, the Christian should be the first one saying, yeah, that is horrible that is happening. Now, one thing that is happening though that I perhaps might be seeing, and I'm getting a bit worried about, is that the minorities that are receiving the treatment that they have been deserving for so long, these minorities might be pushing this same type of approach that was pushed against them when they were not in power. So to the point of uh, many people being scared of having these conversations. And of course, I cannot be put in the shoes of a person that has been suffering for this. So I get that is very important, but the only thing I'm saying with this is that we shouldn't be scared of asking these questions, and asking a question, actually saying that I don't agree that this is the what this is actually the what you're saying. If we say that I don't agree with this is automatically becoming such X or
yeah,
Y, this is actually becoming what we or they have been criticizing all along. And no one wants that. No one truly wants that. So my point here is, man, let's keep having these
yeah,
conversations while we support the community of saying, hey, I mean, it's kind of crazy. Yeah, we are people. Of course you guys are. And we need to recognize that you haven't been treated well. This is
yeah.
this is horrible. But we cannot get to the point of now demonizing people because of their asking questions about certain topics while we explore these ideas.
And
Well,
and on that, real quick, I can just say I wholeheartedly echo that. I'm not a fan of us completely writing off somebody's humanity and potential to change and become better
mm,
just simply because they made a tweet 4 years ago.
yeah,
I think what you do, just like in person, right? You meet somebody for the first time and you go
yeah,
up and you shake their hand and you say, hey, how are you? And he turns around and he slaps you in the face. And you go, okay, well, maybe he's having a bad day. And you go, so hey man, how you doing? And he punches you this time.
yeah,
I think at that point, that's where we can say, like, okay, no, that guy's a jerk.
yeah.
And we can write those people off. The people that are still walking around that are very proud to call themselves associated with Hitler and his ideologies and continue to do that, I think it's fair for us to say, okay, the bad people. But I don't think we necessarily completely shut everything down, because I worry about bad things existing in a vacuum of themselves.
Yeah.
I worry about them growing, and I think we all kind of feel this way. We all feel that we can better each other by continuing these dialogues, you
Um,
know?
yeah, definitely. And that yes, and we could keep talking as
Yeah.
like with every single question, we could keep talking about this. But that was a good exchange. I think we got to the hour, but last
Oh
time we
gosh.
went over a few minutes. So let's actually tackle one more question if that is
Yeah.
okay with you. And then we'll finish our conversation. I don't even know which one to choose. But okay, I'll choose the one about hell. So,
Yeah.
um, the concept of hell seems to be a very controversial topic. Uh, Now, allow me to build a small case so that you understand from where I'm coming with this question. As an atheist, as soon as an atheist, as a Christian, this happened to me. It got to a point in which I asked the following question: when, this is a two-part question, by the way, and I'll let you talk till the end of the show. If someone comes home and kills my wife, or kills my family, or my friends, or whatever, the first reaction that I have as a human being, someone would say, no, I don't have that reaction. Okay, but in general, the probability someone would say that person needs to be condemned, that needs to be punished. There's a punishment. There needs to be a punishment. And society actually has been built under this premise. Something bad happens, I have the right to want that person to be punished, to the point of actually of death, in not only one culture, but many. Now, when it comes to believing that there's a good and evil, my first question is, if there is someone, hypothetically for you, because you don't believe in God, of course, but if there's someone that has set up the boundaries of good and evil, and this person actually knows what good and evil is, and this person, actually, God is not the one theologically, it's not the one that sends people to anywhere. People send themselves. But the existence of a place like this, when people do bad things, why is that difficult to understand? When we do the same in our lives, we require punishment for people, and when we think about life, this is hard. And I have another question, and that's it. And imagine that you're talking to a person, and you're talking to a Christian, and you go, okay, so let's talk about hell, heaven. Oh, okay, so it's wrong, it doesn't exist, it's fake, that's not true. Now this person would ask you, so what happens to me when I die? And the answer probably would be, well, you find meaning in life, and then you die and nothing matters. So from a descriptive analysis of both worldviews, which is, one gives you, we're not talking about true or not true, although it's important, but one worldview gives you a place where you're going to be eternally happy, and a place where it's not going to be as good as we want. And the other one says that, well, it doesn't say, but it kind of leads you to think that everything that you do is very good, but it's ultimately meaningless. So this is what I call, in terms, like, this is kind of the atheist hell, which is everything that you do is ultimate meaningless. So why is it better than the other worldview, and why should I accept that? And so those are the two things. I know that I've said many things, but I'll give you 10 minutes or whatever you guys want to answer both.
Well, there definitely is two questions there.
Yeah.
Let me start with hell first. I certainly can accept institutional punishment. I can accept the moral justification for institutional punishment. What I can't accept, and what runs afoul to all my intuitions about justice or morality, is the idea that any crime, honestly, any crime that even a human is capable of, even the most heinous crimes, it demands an infinite punishment. Not just an infinite punishment, but an infinite punishment that requires like the maximum pain that a person can feel. That does not jive with my understanding of reciprocity of justice. So if somebody does a crime, the punishment should fit the crime, right? So if there is a temporal crime, even if it's a terrible temporal crime, and you're requiring an infinite punishment, that runs to me afoul of my understanding of justice. And we take this even a step further, where the idea that all people have a crime that they've committed by default that demands eternal punishment and that demands infinite pain, like this is our default state. That to me, in and of itself, seems absurd. Now, the second part of the question, or the second question, a Christian, I will be happy to cede that for some people, a Christian worldview will present something that gives their life meaning. I think that for other people that maybe get meaning in a different way, that they have different values and they don't require sort of an eternal work to derive meaning. Now, you actually said that from an atheist worldview, when you die, everything that you do is meaningless. And I'm not so sure about that. Actually, we can't get into it right now, but I'm not even so sure that there isn't any kind of life after death. I don't think that an atheist worldview says anything about that. I think that maybe there's some work that needs to be done, and you might have to talk about it, discuss what you mean. But I do think that there can be meaning in the work that an atheist does, or in the life that an atheist lives, even if they just die and their consciousness ceases to be. With that, Elliott, I'll hand it on over to you, my friend.
Yeah. So one comment, when talking about this, I want to make sure, like, it's not like atheists only have meaningless lives. I'm not saying that. It's like human beings. If this is true, when we just die, what happens and what's the meaning of everything that we did? So I wasn't just saying, oh, so atheism is everything's. I don't think that any life around us is meaningless. I don't think that, but I appreciate the answer, Joel.
Let me clarify just real quick. Where I agree with you, actually, I agree that from my worldview, there isn't an absolute meaning. There isn't perhaps what we might call an ultimate meaning, but
okay.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, for all of the wonderful people that are currently listening to the podcast that have not seen me nodding along vigorously with a lot of what Joel said there, I'd love to spend some time working with the potential for a life after death thing too. But yeah, I mean, the vast majority of what Joel said, I wholeheartedly agree with. I mean, the idea that there is a finite punishment, a finite crime that is punished with infinity of anything, is ridiculous to begin with. In my eyes, I also think that a quick answer to why do we accept this idea of punishment in the practical sense in the world with jail, but atheists don't seem to accept this in the ultimate sense with God. We as humans that put people in jail did not make the world. God made everything. God made the rules. God made the world. He made all the bad. He made all the good. Because he did all that, the fact that he is punishing us for all of the things that he ultimately allows and ultimately does and all of this. I heard something very interestingly. I'll plug another wonderful channel I like, Godless Granny. She just did a discussion the other day about, did God actually desire sin? And I think there's some good, I've never really thought about it like that, but I think there's some good points to break down there to show that in the framework that we have from the Bible, God does desire sin. And so God does desire all of this bad stuff. And I think there's a really interesting, I know I was really interested in that. I was so excited, and I'm going to have to go back and watch some more to break it down. But I'd also like to throw out that I am personally against the death penalty. I do not agree that there is something that we can do as humans that should necessitate us as a society, any particular ruling party in a government. I think one of the most atrocious things that the Trump administration did in its 4 years was put more people to death than anybody in decades. Not a single one of our presidents has put somebody to death in the last 30 days of them being in office, except Grover Cleveland. What the heck does that guy even matter to American history? But that's it. I'm sorry, I just got off.
Yeah.
But I think that there is an understanding, and I agree with kind of the framework you were laying out, in the sense that if somebody came into my home and did something terrible to myself or my family or so forth, we would all be very angry about that. We would all be very emotional and disgusted, even maybe to a core, like just truly disgusted. But maybe this is just because I don't accept an I don't accept an afterlife. I consider death to be ultimate punishment. I consider death to be an infinite punishment for a finite crime. And especially where I stand when it comes to the lack of free will, and things, as far as we know, being material and physical, I think we will continue to understand things about human consciousness and be able to get to a place where we are able to fix some of these problems. It definitely seems to be a problem in a society of conscious beings if any one individual doesn't give a crap about the rest of them, completely doesn't give a crap. Not just some jerk that cuts you off in traffic like they did me earlier today, but like truly is uncaring and uncompassionate for any other living creature. There is something wrong with that. Whether it's a fundamental sense or a practical sense, it doesn't matter. There is a problem there that needs to be fixed. And I think we can get to a place where at the very least we make progress on that. And one of the reasons I can say that is because we already have made progress. There are many, many people right now, through no fault of their own, that were born with very interesting chemical combinations in their brain that do not allow them to care about other people. And there's nothing they can do about it. There are also other people out there that have these weird chemical combinations that make them see things that don't exist. And so some of the bad things that they do are ultimately just a result of the fact that they are hallucinating. We have created a fantastic field of psychology that has really, really helped with this. And not only that, but pharmacology.
Yeah.
And the more we study that, I think we'll get better with it, and we won't have to have these draconian means that we do today.
Okay, well, those are big statements, my friend Elliott Martin.
I think I may have planted a flag in a few places today.
Those are big statements, but definitely that's why we're here. Well, okay, so first of all, thank you very much, Elliott and Joel. Fantastic conversation. And after this conversation, let me just share one thought about it. Yeah, I perhaps in the future will give some rest to people of me and you guys. We have done many conversations, but perhaps I would like to come back because as a whole, after hearing this, I'm actually wondering, is actually well-being another social construct? I would like to know that. And if that is true, man, that would change dramatically the way we see the world. Perhaps a conversation to have another time. And I hope the conversation was engaging for you guys that are watching. And if you hear anything, if you heard something of what Joel or Elliott said, you would like to challenge. If you would like to challenge any of my questions, if you thought that there are things that you liked or things that you didn't, just don't think about it twice and send me an email at askandwondernashville@gmail.com. I would love to put you in contact with both Joel and Elliott if that's what you want, and you guys can ask me questions to me. We're very thankful for these opportunities, and I'm thankful for you, Elliott, and for you, Joel. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you both. It's always awesome.
Thanks, guys.